And in this video I'm going to show you how to compute alpha and beta for an individual stock or a portfolio, right? So if you remember, your CAPM equation is this, right? Cost of equity or required rate of return on any stock is equals to the risk-free rate plus beta times return on the market minus risk-free rate, right? And this equation can be rewritten as you can take the risk-free rate on the left side, so it becomes return on equity minus return on risk-free rate equals to beta times RM minus RF, return on risk-free rate, right? And this is the excess return on equity, and this is excess return on the market, right? That means excess return on the equity is proportional to the excess return on the market, and that relationship depends on the value of beta. If beta is more than 1, that means the return on security is more volatile than the market. If the beta is less than 1, then the return on security is less volatile than the market. This equation can be compared with the regression that you have learned, right? Like y equals to a plus bx, where x stands for this excess market return and y stands for excess return of the security. And if you compare this y equals to a plus bx with the CAPM doesn't have a, right? That is 0 in CAPM. That's why we can look at the value of a when we compute using the stock return, and then we can use that value of a in order to evaluate the performance of a stock or a portfolio, right? So what I want to do is I'm going to show in Excel how to compute this A, or usually in finance is called alpha, and B, and usually that is beta. And I want to compute this alpha and beta in Excel for an individual stock as well as portfolio. All right, so let's see how we do that. Keep one thing in mind here. The CAPM has a relationship between excess return of the equity and excess return of the market. That's why when we want to compute alpha and beta, okay, we need to compute the excess return of stock and the excess return of the market. So I have here data, and I have already computed return and excess return for individual stock to save our time. So what I have in this file is, now I have the last 5 years of data for Apple, S&P 500 and Treasury, 13-week Treasury bill. So what we have to do first is we have to compute the simple return, and we have covered this many times. So if you see on the top, you will see the formula, how I have computed each line. So to compute the Apple stock, as you know, right, equals to your current price minus your past price and over past price, and you compute this simple return, and you can grab the handle and drag it, and you can get the simple return for Apple. Similarly, you can compute simple return for S&P 500. And 13 weeks treasury bill we get from Yahoo Finance, that is a annual yield, meaning the rate. But here we are computing monthly return, and they are in decimal. So in order to compute this given rate from Yahoo Finance into monthly decimal, I divide this by 1200, so that all of these variables will be in the same unit and they can be used. So first we compute the simple return, and after we compute the simple return, we compute the excess return. And this is for an individual stock, so you compute excess return for Apple and excess return for the market. So how we compute excess return, and here is the formula, but you can do this, like excess return means the return of the security minus the risk-free rate. If you do this, you can get the excess return for Apple, and you can grab the handle and drag it, and similarly you can compute the excess return for the market, and that is again your market return minus the risk-free rate, right? So once you compute this excess return series for the market as well as the individual stock, and you can compute alpha and beta. And typically there are two ways you can compute alpha and beta. One, using slope and intercept function in Excel. Right here I have done this, and let me redo this right here. And there is another way to compute alpha and beta using regression function. So let me do this first. So in order to compute CAPM alpha, you can use this intercept function. So what you have to do is equals to intercept, right? INTERCEPT here, intercept. And now if you choose that intercept, it says y values, meaning y is, if you remember, CAPM is the dependent variable, and that is the excess return of Apple, right? Y values, comma, and you need the x value, right? X value is going to be your excess market return. So if you do that and you get the CAPM alpha for Apple, you can close the parenthesis and hit enter, and that gives you the CAPM alpha. And similarly you can compute beta, and that beta is a slope function, so you can use slope. And again, once you write slope, it gives you y values, comma, x values, and y is going to be your Apple excess return, right? And comma, your x value is going to be your excess return of the market. So if you do so and close the parenthesis and enter, and you get the CAPM beta, which is 1.28, and that means it's more than 1. The Apple stock is more volatile than the average market. And this is easier way to do, but it is sometimes not very better way to do it. So there's another way you can compute alpha and beta using Excel's regression function, and which I prefer because it also provides other information which you can use in order to select stock. So let me show you how to do that. So in order to compute alpha and beta using Excel's regression function, what you have to do is click on data and click on data analysis. And if you click on data analysis, it gives you the window, and select a regression function right here. So click on this regression and click on OK. And once you click OK, it gives you option to choose your dependent variable, independent variable, and wherever you want to put your output result. So for us, y input range, meaning that is our dependent variable, and that dependent variable is going to be our excess return on Apple. So you're gonna select all the historical return on Apple stock, right? And click on that down arrow, and that's, we chose y input range. And now x is the independent variable, so this time x is the excess market return. So you're gonna click on this arrow and select all your excess market return. And once you make that selection, and now you can choose where you want to put output. Otherwise you can click OK, it produces output in different Excel set. If you want to put output in the same Excel set, you can choose output range, and now you can choose wherever you want to put output. If I choose right here, that means it will produce output there. Once you make that selection, click OK. Now it produces regression result output, right? And this right here, intercept and x variable 1, these are the alpha and beta, and you can express this alpha because that's a average return after considering is risk. That's why you can express that in a percent. So another important thing you have to look at here is, I'm going to change the format. A number show me 4 decimal places, so that now you can see this p-value. And this p-value is critically important. If the p-value is more than 5%, that means the value you have computed for alpha and beta is not useful. But if the p-value is less than 5%, then this information that alpha and beta provides is useful. So in this case, this alpha or the intercept has a p-value of 0.89, right, which is more than 5%. So that means this alpha is not useful. That means this is insignificant, and the information it provides is not useful. So you cannot rely on the information on that number. But the p-value of the beta is less than 5%, which means the information that beta provides is significant and meaningful, and you can use the information you get out of that beta. See, this is the advantage of using a regression in order to compute alpha and beta. It also has a p-value, and p-value is very useful to figure out whether the information these numbers provide are useful or not. So this is how you compute alpha and beta for individual stock. So next I want to show you how to compute alpha and beta for a portfolio. So this time I have more than one stock. Earlier I had just Apple stock, and now I have also Nvidia stock and S&P 513 week treasury bill. So first we have to do is calculate simple return, right, as we did earlier. Calculate simple return, and once you compute simple return, now we want to compute alpha and beta for a portfolio. That's why you have to create a portfolio return series. And how do you compute this portfolio return series? For example, I have already done that, and the formula is given on the top. Let's say here, what you have to do is whatever money you want to put on each stock, you have to multiply the individual return and find the weighted average. So for example, if I want to put 50% money on Apple and 50% on Nvidia, then I can do that, right? So that equals to, right here, equals to 0.5 times the return of Apple plus 0.5 times return on Nvidia. So you can do this and grab this handle and drag it. If you want to change the weight, you can do that too. If you want to, let's put 40% on Apple and 60% on Nvidia, you can do that. Equals to 0.4 times return on Apple plus 0.6 times return on Nvidia. So once you compute this portfolio return series, to compute Excel's regression function or slope or intercept, we need to compute the excess return, right? That's why we compute the excess return. And how we compute excess return, like earlier, excess return is simply your portfolio return minus the risk-free rate. That gives the excess return of your portfolio, and similarly you can do this for all the rest of the cell, and then you can compute the excess return for your market, and that excess return for market is again your market return minus the risk-free rate, right? This is how you compute the excess return series per portfolio, excess return for the market. And once you compute the excess return for portfolio and excess return for market, you can use Excel's regression function or slope function. And I have shown you here how to do this in using Excel's intercept and slope function. And let me redo it using Excel's regression function one more time. So that is data, and here data analysis, and then you choose regression and OK. And now we still have the input from the earlier selection, but we have to change now our dependent variable, which is the Y input range, is now portfolio excess return, right? So you're going to choose that portfolio excess return. Portfolio excess return. And once you make that selection, now you have to choose independent variable, which is the excess return for your market, right? That's always the independent variable. That's why excess return on the market. And once you make that selection, and now where you want to put your output, you can choose that somewhere you like. For me, I'm just putting here. So right here, OK. And once you make all that selection and you hit enter OK, and you get the regression output. And here you can see portfolio alpha and beta right here. So that is our portfolio alpha and beta. Portfolio alpha is 0.016 and beta is 1.24. What about the p-value here? and the p-value, again, let me change the format right here up to 4 decimal places, right? So I can see here, and in this case, see here, the p-value is less than 5% in both cases. That means the information that numbers provide is somehow reliable. So how you interpret this alpha, which is 1.66%, that means the portfolio that you have constructed, meaning the putting 50% money on Apple stock and 50% on Nvidia, that means on average that portfolio had 1.66% monthly return in the last 5 years. So this alpha is risk adjusted return. That means the return you get after you consider the systematic or the market risk. Higher that alpha means the portfolio performance is better, or if you were calculating alpha per individual stock, higher alpha means the risk adjusted return is higher, and you can use that alpha value to rank the securities to make a portfolio. And similarly, this beta is 1.24, which is more than 1, right? And its p-value is less than 5%. So the value is significant, and the information that beta provides is useful, and that is beta is more than 1. The portfolio you have is more volatile than the market. If market moves up by 1%, your portfolio is going to move up by 1.24%. And if the market moves down by 1%, your portfolio is going to move down by 1.24%. So you can calculate individual betas, and you can sort the individual security based on betas, and you can make portfolio however you want to construct, whether you want to make a portfolio of stocks that are very aggressive if you think the future market is going to grow higher, and if you want to make a defensive portfolio, you can choose all the stock with the lower betas if you think the future market is not going to do very well. So this is how you compute alpha and beta using regression function, and that's all I want to say. Thank you.